Hi everyone, this is Mira from Effective English. Do you struggle speaking English even though your understanding of English is at a high level? You are not alone. And there are actual reasons behind that situation. In today's video, I would like to point out 5 possible reasons why you are not speaking English yet. Let's begin. Reason number 1. You haven't had enough practice yet. We simply forget that by reading alone, we'll not be able to speak. By listening alone, we'll not be able to speak. By studying grammar rules alone, we'll not be able to speak. Remember, speaking English requires different skills than listening. It requires different skills than reading. It requires different skills than knowing which tense to use. Remember, speaking is a different skill, and you need to learn it separately from reading, listening, and studying grammar rules. You have to remember about this. And how do you do it? Let's take the cue from little babies. How do little babies acquire a language? How does it happen? So from the day they are born, they are immersed. They are immersed in a language. But do they know anything about that language? They don't know a thing about it. Not a sound, not a letter, not a word, not a sentence, nothing. So they are immersed. And after a while, they start to produce very simple sounds like ba, ma, very simple sounds. And what happens is they do it so often. They do it non-stop. So they practice non-stop. It's not like they don't say to themselves, they don't think like, oh, I've practiced enough today, maybe I'll stop. No, they're unstoppable. They do it all the time, every day, every waking hour, whenever they are up, they just practice and practice and practice. So first they are able to produce simple sounds. Then they're able to produce simple words, then simple sentences. And remember, they are super simple because they could be something like, mommy help, mommy eat, mommy hungry, mommy go. It can be very simple sentences. But what's most important, this is just effective communication. But right now, what we are seeing with little babies, and you really have to take the cues from babies, is that they practice gazillion times every single day. They don't care how many times they've already practiced. They're going to put one more. That's why they are so successful at acquiring a language. And that's what you were doing when you were a little baby. So why are you stopping yourself from practicing today? If you really want to have the result, if you really want to speak, you have to practice, practice, and practice. And yes, you may tell me, oh, you know what? I don't have time for that. Or I don't want to attend any classes. Or, it's too expensive to have a tutor or anything like that. Okay. You can actually be like that little baby. When the baby was producing these sounds, ma, ga, bo, bo, whatever, was there a recipient of that message? Not really. And they were not really thinking about it like, who's listening to me? Not really. They were just practicing for their own sake. So what you have to do is you just have to practice for your own sake. Like, just do it, in the bathroom, in front of the mirror, while doing the dishes, while vacuuming, while doing all these different things you do at home. Of course, you don't want to do it outside because you're going to look crazy. Maybe you want to do it. Of course, no judgment here. If you want to do it, that's absolutely okay. But if not, you can do it at home and you can practice. But make sure to practice like crazy, just like babies do. If you're going to keep on doing that, I promise you're going to see results very, very quickly. Just speak and speak and speak and speak non-stop. Practice gazillion times every single day, and then you'll see the results. So that's one thing. Reason number 1, you haven't had enough practice. Reason number 2, let me have a look at this. Yes, forget about grammar, at least for now. I know some of you are going to say like, what? No, grammar is important. Of course it is. As is listening, as is reading and speaking. All of these are very important. But if you want to know how to speak a language, if you want not to be afraid to speak a language, English, then you really have to forget about grammar rules for a moment. And I'll tell you why. I've seen so many times, I'm going to give you like 2 examples today. I've seen so many times people who have been like, frozen because of the fact that they knew grammar rules and they wanted to apply grammar rules to whatever they wanted to say. And it actually stopped them from saying anything. So there's a certain point where grammar rules are not so good for you and they are actually hindering your progress as it comes to speaking. So I'm going to give you 2 examples now. So I used to have this student. She was actually older than me. She was a university teacher. And she came to me because she said, I study all these books in English, but, whenever we have meetings and I have to open my mouth, I'm just unable to do it. Okay. Yes. Okay. She hasn't had enough practice. That's one of the reasons, definitely. But 2, what struck me in the first lesson, when I asked her a very simple question, I don't remember what that question was, so I'll not tell you exactly. But what I do remember was the way she answered, or at least the way she analyzed how to answer. It was like, okay, so this is a general situation. So if this is a general situation, then I need to use simple present. Okay, simple present. Okay, so if it was 3rd person singular, I would use S. But because I'm talking about myself, I will not put an S, so there's going to be like a bare verb. Okay, and then I can say it. Maybe I should also put like this time expression there. And that's going to be a good sentence. Is that correct? And then she asked me, and I was like, what's happening here? I'm like, really? By the time you have finished analyzing, the person who asked the question would already leave. It's not how you communicate. It's just not how you communicate. So actually, her obsessiveness around being grammatically correct caused her to first analyze how to say something and then to say it. That was ridiculous. So what happens here, it actually hinders our progress, as I said, and it also stops us from actually speaking. We are only able to think one thought at a time. So if that thought is analyzing how to say and which grammar rule to put in, that's terrible. Because, that was only one question that I asked to this person, but imagine a conversation with somebody. She would not be able to hold a conversation. Not. She would pretty much resign. She would think like, I don't even know how to say it. I don't know which grammar rule I'm supposed to put in here because it's just there's too many conditions or there's just too many things she has to think about before actually saying what she wants to say. So that's really terrible. And the second example I want to give you, and this is like very interesting because this is coming from a person who actually works for me. He's an ESL teacher, and what's really funny in this situation is that he's basically got like this other idea of how to acquire and learn a language. So from his perspective, like grammar is really important, and by analyzing and studying grammar rules, you're able to acquire a language. And yes, I agree, while that may be true for some people, that's true, but for most people, that's not the case. And for him, it's not either. So basically, he came to Poland and he decided to study Polish. So he's on a mission to actually learn Polish. And as you may know or not know, Polish is one of the most difficult languages in the world because of the fact that, the verbs, the verb endings like change so many times. There are so many conditions that you have to apply to actually make a grammatically correct sentence that it's just like, it's unbearable. So the other day he came to me and he was like, you know what, like, I don't think I will ever be able to speak Polish. And I was like, why are you saying that? And he's like, it's like there's just too many rules to apply. To me right now, it's all just like so blurry. There's just like too much to think about. I'm like, yeah, that's the problem. This is the beginning of your journey and you should not focus on grammar right now. Just forget about it. Forget about grammar. Right now, focus on input. So watch TV, listen to radio, listen to podcasts, read stuff, listen to songs, do all this stuff and practice some Polish with me. That way, you are definitely going to make progress. And that's very true. So remember, forget about grammar for a moment. If you then, like at some point when you're going to start to speak English and you will start to feel like confident with English, with speaking English, then you can try to analyze grammar rules. And I think that's a good idea because it's very important to actually make progress with English. Because if you're just going to stop there and you will not analyze grammar rules, I think at some point you will not make progress. Grammar rules are helpful, but at a certain point, they are not. So if you don't know how to speak or if you're afraid to speak, don't study grammar rules yet. Forget about them. Just forget about them. Let it go. And reason number 3, which is like, I think to some extent, this is connected with reason number 2, is like, don't be afraid to make mistakes. So we are afraid to make mistakes. Yes, most of us are. Yeah, and it actually stems from the fact that like in very many countries, the educational system that we are in is very obsessed with not making mistakes. So if you make a mistake, it's so bad that it's like you get punished for making mistakes. So then it translates to the way you live, and it also translates to the way you learn and acquire language. You are afraid to make mistakes because you are afraid of being judged, just like you were judged by your teachers when you were making mistakes. So right now what you have to do is you really have to change your mindset. It's not easy to do, but first you have to become more conscious of the fact that you just have to change that mindset. And once you let it go, once you actually, how do I say it? When you actually say, that's okay if I make a mistake. It's okay if it's not going to be grammatically correct. That's okay. Effective communication is what matters at this point. Nothing else matters at this point for me. So at that point, if you're going to say that to yourself, and you're going to let it go, you will start to make progress. Because it's super important to understand that the only way to make progress is to make mistakes. And yes, you're going to make lots and lots of mistakes, but it doesn't matter. Effective communication is what matters. And I'm going to give you an example of that as well. So I basically hire only people who are not from Poland. So because we are based in Poland, so I don't want to have teachers who speak Polish. I don't want them. Because then kids actually make use of that and they speak Polish. So I want the kids to be made to use English at all times. So on my team, I also have a person who helps me, and her English level is so-so, okay? So she's able to communicate, but she does make a lot of mistakes. But what's cool, he doesn't really care about making these mistakes. She doesn't. So whenever we have like this dinner, when we go out together, we have a conversation. She also speaks without any problem whatsoever. She makes mistakes, but you know what? What's the most important thing? She's doing it effectively. Everyone understands whatever she's saying. And if they do understand, then why bother? We just simply forget that, English or any language whatsoever is a communication tool. And we need to speak it to communicate effectively. And just because you didn't do it correctly, you made a mistake here and there, doesn't make it bad. It's just okay, you made a mistake. With enough input, in the end, you will stop making those mistakes. And it's really okay. So just let it go. Just like with grammar, you have to let go. You can make mistakes. And what's really cool, because here you're going to change your mindset. So this is also going to translate to your whole life. Because in so many areas of our life, we are afraid of making mistakes. We are afraid of being judged. So if you change that mindset within the language learning, it will also translate to other areas of your life. So it's so cool because it's a win-win situation on so many different fields. And that's so cool. And one thing also to remember, I also make mistakes. Even though I've been learning English for so many years and, I've had so much practice and I work with English every single day, I still make mistakes. But you know what? I don't care. I don't care. I'm not a native speaker and I am aware of the fact that I will make mistakes. They're not major mistakes. I make minor mistakes, but I do make them. I'm aware of it. But then, hey, why bother? Because if I was afraid to make mistakes, I would not be recording this video. I would not be teaching English. I would not. Because I would be afraid. And that leads us to reason number 4, which is very, very tightly connected to not being afraid to make mistakes, is stop perfectionism. You really have to stop this. Stop perfectionism. The thing here is not every person who makes mistakes is a perfectionist, but every perfectionist is afraid of making mistakes. And that's the problem. If you're a perfectionist, then what I can tell you is, once again, you have to let it go. And it's easier said than done. I am aware of that because I am a perfectionist myself and I still haven't let go yet. So this is very difficult. But I just want to give you an example of these 2 guys I used to work with for a moment. And I'm just going to ask you a question at the end. And I think once you're going to answer that question, I think it's going to be super clear what you have to do and how to approach this. Because me simply telling you stop perfectionism is not gonna help this. But okay, so I used to when I was still studying, so it was some time ago, during holidays, I went to work in the Netherlands. As you know or don't know, in the Netherlands, they also use English. Okay, so there's pretty much every Dutch person uses English. Okay? If you turn on TV, you see English. So there's lots of English. Okay? So I was working with these 2 Polish guys, and they were very different. So the first one was a perfectionist. And I could see this with pretty much everything. His shirt that was always ironed, there was not a single crease. The way he worked, it was perfect. Everything was perfect. And also he, with his English, he also wanted to be perfect. And I'm an observer. I like to observe stuff. So what I noticed about this guy was that sometimes he would not say anything, even though I could see he wanted to say something, but he didn't say it because perfectionism stopped him from doing that, especially in front of our boss. He would not say stop because he would be afraid of making a mistake. That's one. But it's also this perfectionism. He just wanted his sentence to be so perfect that, everybody would say, wow, it's amazing. Or actually, he would actually tell himself, oh, that's amazing. This sentence is perfect. So obviously this perfectionism was hindering his progress because he wouldn't have enough practice, or he wouldn't have as much practice as a person who wasn't a perfectionist. Okay? He was at this A2 level as it comes to speaking, I would say. Okay, so his sentences were not very complex, but obviously when he was saying stuff, it was perfect. I can tell you this. He would deliver perfect sentences. He really would. And then was this other guy. So let's put it like this. So his level was definitely lower. Definitely, okay? His understanding was quite good, but as it comes to speaking, it was very basic, super basic. Okay, but what was different about this guy number 2 was that he was super confident. He was not afraid of making mistakes, and he was not a perfectionist for sure. Okay, you could actually see it with his dirty shoes and stuff, but it doesn't matter. He was not a perfectionist. So he was able to communicate with every single Dutch person working with us. He didn't need anybody to help him out because he was able to effectively communicate with these people. And he was always talking. even in front of a boss. He didn't care about it. So now imagine these two people, okay, this perfectionist who is at like a higher level, and this guy who's super confident, but he pretty much sucks quite a bit, but he's not afraid to speak, and he's not a perfectionist. So just imagine like being with them 1 year and observing how they progress, how they develop their speaking skills. I'll tell you one thing. The guy who actually is a perfectionist, I would think that he would make very, very little progress because he would be stuck in his perfectionism. Whereas the guy who's very confident but lacks the skills yet would progress a lot because he would still be in an environment where there would be these Dutch people communicating with him in English, and he would be communicating back to them in English. At some point, his mistakes would be more minor, his sentences would be longer and more complex, and he would definitely be much better at speaking than this perfectionist guy. So just like think about it. Just really think about it. Is it worth it? Is it worth it to be a perfectionist? I don't think so. And I'm talking from a perspective of a perfectionist. I'm a perfectionist myself, really. And I'm really trying to learn not to be one, okay? I'm not a perfectionist in every single field, but whatever I care about a lot, I am a perfectionist. So just think about it and let it go. Because this is one of the reasons why you are not speaking your English yet. So now reason number 5. Simplify your native language. What I mean by that is if you make a decision that you actually will speak from tomorrow on, and you will practice a lot, and you will forget about grammar for a while, you will let go of if I make mistakes or not, doesn't matter. You will stop perfectionism. You will start to translate from your native language to English to speak. You will do that. This is something that happens every single time we as language learners want to acquire a new language do. That's what we do, basically. Okay. Well, the problem here is that your native language, well, you're a pro at your language. You're a real professional. You know how to build complex sentences. The knowledge of grammar is at such a high level. Your speaking skills are such a high level. Your vocabulary is amazing. Yes. Whereas when you compare it to English, in that case, well, it's much lower. So then if you're trying to translate from this language that you know really well to English, we encounter real problems. And that's what I'm seeing with my students. So for example, I would see, let's say we're talking about a certain topic, and I ask a question, and then they think of an answer in Polish, but then their answer is so complex that, they don't know the words and the sentence structures in English to be able to translate whatever they want to say in Polish into English. They're just not able. The levels differ so much. So if you want to be able to translate properly and not be frustrated about the fact that you're just not able to translate the sentence, then you need to simplify the way you think in your native language. At least at first. Because just think about these, once again, I'm going to go back to these babies. Just think about these little babies. Are they able to produce complex sentences after a year, 2, 3, 4? No, they're not. There's a process, okay? And we cannot skip certain parts of the process. So first we're going to be able to say words, then we're going to be able to say simple sentences, then more complex, more complex. So it just goes like this. There's a progress, but we have to go level by level. We cannot skip levels. So we have to start at this very simple basic level, and we have to think at the same level in our native language to then be able to translate into English language. And that's what you have to do. And that's what I always tell my students. Okay, simplify what you want to say. Just make it much simpler. So then it's easier for you to say it in English. That's also one of the reasons why you're not able to speak, because you want to say too complex sentences. They're too complex, way too complex, and you don't want to overcomplicate this. Simply. Okay, so that's actually it from me. So let me just wrap this up. So number 1, practice as much as possible. You haven't had enough practice, and that's the reason why you're not able to speak. Number